and knowing is half the battle. G.I. Joes.
The more you know.
Some assembly required. Do you remember those? Did you ever watch G.I. Joe's cartoon?
Just very little. Yeah, I mean, I think my parents did not allow me to watch it after a while because I would be a little bit too rambunctious.
Too fighty?
Yeah. And I have 2 younger sisters, and so they're always the...
I get it. I mean, I wasn't allowed to watch Ninja Turtles because
of that very thing?
I would do too many karate moves afterwards.
Jumping off the couches.
Jumping off couches and things.
I remember you doing that.
Yeah, I remember my older son, when I first learned of the Ninja Turtles, I thought, oh, this is absolutely ridiculous. This is going to go nowhere. And they kind of did all right.
Yeah.
You're telling me that adults, the people running the network, got pitched this idea about turtles that went down into the sewer and
eating pizza
and turned into mutant Ninja Turtles. Somehow the slime made them know kung fu. And the adults at the network said, that's it.
Oh, yeah. And once I learned they are named after these Renaissance artists, though, I kind of warmed up to them. Well,
that's true. I mean,
cool.
that part is
kind of a
cool
concept.
Yeah.
Live on Facebook.
That means don't say anything.
All right. Here we
go. Warning. The Catholic Man Show contains high levels of manliness. It's simple, really. You either want to grow in virtue and holiness, or you want to be a sissy, whiny baby. If you choose to move forward, grab your whiskey glass, because the Catholic Man Show is starting right now.
Welcome to the Catholic Man Show. We're on the Lord's team, the winning side, so raise your glass. Adam Minahan here, sitting in studio. It feels good to be back into studio. We haven't been here in a while. With David Niles, my best friend, and best friend Juan Posada on the buttons. We have a great guest this morning. Whether you're listening to it in the morning, I don't know. But
right now it's morning.
But right now it is morning.
For the real people here.
That's right. Dr. Kevin Vost. Vost. Yep, you told me that's how to remember it. Because I always said Vost. Did you say Vost too?
No, I told you. I think it's Vost. Because I think that's what I've heard people say. But
it is Vost.
Yeah, I will say when I'm announced on different programs, I probably am announced Vost over 50% of the time.
Okay.
Slightly under 50 is Vost. But yeah, we go by Vost. I was going to say too, I love that little intro dialogue. It makes you want to hit the crab and glare. Good stuff.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the show. It's great to have you. I can remember the first time I was introduced to you was probably about 6-7 years ago at the Oklahoma Catholic Men's Conference down in Norman.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
That's one of the best men's conferences in the nation, in my opinion. Dave and I have been to a lot of men's conferences. It has over 1,000 to 1,200 men. The facility is great. It's ran very, very well.
Yeah.
But you were a speaker there.
Yeah, if I remember, I was talking about the 7 deadly sins, and I did a demonstration, well, not of the deadly sins themselves, but how to memorize them.
Yeah,
I believe that's part of it.
I did a demonstration of the deadly sins.
Okay, don't do these things, guys.
For instance, this is number 1.
Yeah.
Can I get a volunteer?
Yeah. But yeah, so it's great to have you here. You did a talk last night in the Diocese of Tulsa for the Alcuin Institute. You can go to alcuininstitute.org, and for St. Michael Catholic Radio on the art of memory.
Yes.
And it was very well received. We had a great participation, and we thought it'd be great to have you on the show to talk a little bit more about said topic.
Well, I'm happy to be here. That's one of my favorite topics. It was one of my areas of specialization in my studies as a psychologist. Then when I came back into the church, it's become one of my pet areas too, because two of my favorite great saints, St. Albert the Great and St. Thomas Aquinas, were experts in this area.
Yeah, so you were an atheist for 25 years or so, if I remember correctly. So, and you were an avid reader, so you were reading through a lot of probably the modern philosophers would be my guess, Nietzsche and those type of people. Is that what kind of put you on that track?
Well, you're right, but it started a little bit in a less lofty way.
Okay.
I was a weightlifter and a big fan of the muscle magazines of the era.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a top bodybuilder in the 70s, a man named Mike Menzer. He was expected to be the next guy to take over from Arnold Schwarzenegger. It didn't quite work out that way, but he was the first guy to win the Mr. Universe with a perfect score. And he's a really, really bright man. And I learned these different high-intensity strength techniques from him. But he also liked to dabble in philosophy. So he introduced me through his articles. He'd mentioned Friedrich Nietzsche. He became a fan of Ayn Rand later. Then after that, I started reading them myself.
Mm-hmm.
Nietzsche, Ayn Rand, Bertrand Russell, the British atheist philosopher. There's a man, Albert Ellis, a profound American psychologist who did great things in therapy, but was also an atheist. So in my late teens, though I was raised Catholic, by reading some of these wrong philosophers, I was convinced that belief in God was either like self-contradictory, the whole idea of God, or superfluous. We don't need to posit a God. Just open your eyes. The universe is there. That's the starting point. So yeah, I was actually kind of robbed by my faith in my late teens, not because I wanted to be, not because I wanted to reject God. I just thought, in all honesty, boy, I can't believe anymore because I've been given these airtight arguments against God. And then about 25 years later, through a series of events, I read St. Thomas Aquinas for the first time. I thought, oh my gosh, these airtight arguments of the atheists, they were big giant holes poked in them over 700 years ago by St. Thomas Aquinas. And he's borrowing from philosophers and church doctors who lived long before him. So anyway, the answers to this had been there in my faith the whole time.
And probably steel manning a lot of the arguments that you'd already heard,
Oh, that's right.
from these other people.
Exactly. The way Thomas operates, he's going to give you a very strong case against what his final conclusion is. So you have to be careful reading Thomas's objections like, oh, that makes perfect sense, because you're going to see later.
You have to read the whole article.
That's right. I have to be careful when I write about Thomas, not that quote from the objections. So wait a minute, that's what he showed was wrong. But he did that for the atheistic arguments. Because I remember there was a line that said when Charles Darwin read the writings of Aristotle on biology for the first time, he said, some of these modern guys in my day, he said, they're like mere schoolboys compared to old Aristotle. So when I read Aquinas, I thought, oh gosh, these atheist philosophers I've been reading, they're schoolboys and a schoolgirl, Ayn Rand, compared to old St. Thomas Aquinas.
It is a roller coaster reading Thomas, because when he presents these, all right, here's the objections to my original statement, you go like, yeah, I didn't think about that. That's a really good point. How are you going to get out of that one? And then you just feel like an idiot 2 seconds later when you see what he does, and you're like, oh, well, yeah, I guess that totally, you're right. Okay.
Oh, right.
What else you got?
Exactly. He's often shown in those objections how they're capturing like a partial truth. Oh, they got part of it there, but they missed a big important point. And then he's shown you exactly what was missed and why. So, I just love the experience of reading Thomas, especially in the Summa Theologica, where he writes in that formal format.
What do you think is the atheist author that was most truthful, you thought, that was actually like presenting the arguments where, because I've read several atheists and I'm like, I don't think you believe this. I think that this is kind of propaganda.
You're just selling books.
Right. So who do you think was true?
True. Well,
to what he thought.
You mean who was honest?
Right.
Yeah,
maybe that's a better way.
Because they're not true. None of them are true. But
right, yeah. They in their particular areas of specialty, maybe mathematics for Russell, philology for Nietzsche. Yeah, they had some good ideas. They were smart people.
Right.
But the truth regarding God and theology, they're way off base there. But who seemed like the most authentic? Because there's interesting twists with all of them. They said like with Nietzsche, he kind of went crazy at the end of his life. But the rumors was that people in his own area, his village, called him the saint, because I guess he was kind of a kind, mild-mannered man to the people around him. So you have some of these paradoxes. And another one, probably one that had some of the biggest influence on me was Ayn Rand, who was the Russian novelist. People may know her from Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged and things like that. But she also wrote philosophy. But the way she stood out for me was, so many philosophers, atheists then, especially now, are relativists. This is my truth. What's your truth? There is no the truth, which is a kind of a paraphrase.
Like, why are you even writing a book about relativity? Like,
that's right. Why bother?
Yeah, exactly.
That may be true for you. It's not true for me. So
who wants to read the book about what you think? Like if it's just totally relative.
Oh, exactly.
Anyway,
exactly. No, you're right. But that's where Rand stood out as different from the rest of them. And they all also tended to be leftist and collectivist. But she called her system objectivism, which meant she said, there is an objective reality out there. And we have minds that can actually grasp real truths with a capital T. And she claimed that her system was basically an outgrowth of Aristotle, who she highly respected. And interestingly, she also highly respected St. Thomas Aquinas. In kind of a backhanded compliment, she did write at one point that at the time when the church was really embracing Thomism again, this was around the time of Pope Leo the 13th in the late 1800s and stuff, he said, she called Thomas an intellectual giant, and she said the church rose close to the realm of reason at that time. So there's kind of a backhanded thing. But they did respect that. And Rand is interesting. You know, there's lots of flaws in her system. She talked about selfishness. She's missing a lot of human compassion. But she wasn't militant like many of the atheists are now. I remember seeing her once on the Phil Donahue show. It used to be a popular talk show. And she was willing to say, God bless you to people. Yes, I can say that. God bless you. She goes, because it's a gesture. It's a saying that means it's benevolent, you know. So she was willing to do that. So I respected her, but her, that Mike Mincer, the bodybuilder I read, I know that he respected Thomas too, but I highly suspect that they ever read Thomas firsthand. I highly doubt that they had done that, because I just wonder, what would they have thought if they would have really have seen how Thomas reconciled faith and reason in such a glorious way. And while Rand kind of paid lip service to Aristotle, when I started reading Thomas, I realized he wrote line-by-line commentaries on multiple of Aristotle's books. So Thomas knew Aristotle left and right, back and forth.
And if you knew Aristotle that well, you probably would have read Thomas's commentaries, right? I mean, if you were actually a student of Aristotle, it'd be hard to avoid.
That is true. And I must say, I can't say that it's not the case, but I never recall in the objectivist literature seeing anyone cite Thomas's commentaries. Though I know some sources say you might get it might be easier to grasp some of Aristotle's fundamental principles if you read Thomas rather than Aristotle himself.
Yeah. I mean, that's also true about Thomas. You might understand Thomas better if you read some of the commentary, the good commentary that's done on him, depending on what level you are, you know, in the philosophical world.
Well, that's exactly right. You know, because in a tremendous industry on clarifying, simplifying, and modernizing Thomas's language to introduce people. That's part of my shtick, you know. But no, that's part of my my little vocation to try to present Thomas to modern readers. So hey, that kind of makes sense, and hopefully to guide them into I got to look at this guy firsthand.
In fact, you know, since we're just talking about St. Thomas, we should just mention you just published the latest in the Catholic Answers 20 Questions series on St. Thomas Aquinas. So you just just came out
this year. It's the 49th in their beautiful little series, these little books on 20 questions that have the things to do about the faith. And this is actually the first time they did one on a particular saint. But the reason is, you know, Thomas is called the common doctor. He addresses just about everything. Yeah. So even just if you just focus on Thomas, and because it was said of him that because he respected so much the church fathers and theologians that came before him, in a way he inherited the intellect of all of them. So when you read Thomas, you're getting everybody else too, who lived before him.
Well, if you read the Catena Aurea, it's pretty clear the chops, you know, that he's, you know.
Exactly, the golden chain.
Exactly, right. So we're here with Dr. Kevin Vost. We're going to be talking about the art of memory. You're listening to The Catholic Man Show with Adam Minahan and David Niles. We'll be right back.
So do you want to go into the memory playing the role in prudence, a sub-virtue of prudence? Do you want to go into the different types of memory, such as
I do like the idea of memory and prudence, because I think like people talk about prudence a lot, but memory is, I think, either the hardest to talk about for people, or it's
they keep forgetting.
Yeah, they forget that it's there. So we should definitely.
You want to start there?
Yeah, and then
we can go into the different types of memory. I'd like to talk about also at some point. I'm saying this so we don't forget. How to, so you can read, like when you're reading a book, to recall what you read, like to recall, better ways to recall what you've read, because that's a different type of memory.
Because the people, the smartest people I know, I realize like they're really good at remembering what they've read.
It's comprehension.
It's not that they can do math better than me. It's not that they understand grammar. Well, they do, because I'm terrible at grammar. But like. And other things, it's
You're
not
really
that they're
well at it, dude.
Not that they're. Thank you. I think that I do good. Like we're pretty even on, but then all of a sudden, when it comes to like discussion, here they are, like, wow, we're just talking about random stuff, and you can just recall all of. And so I'm just jealous. It's just jealousy.
Well, but we all have our different strengths and weaknesses. One of my area of specialty in psychology was just different cognitive abilities, thinking abilities, reasoning abilities, just all kinds of different memory abilities. We all have our own little profile,
Right.
our own strengths and weaknesses. But one thing I think in terms too that we hear a lot about today is like the idea that we should be able to do critical thinking. Think things through. There's a big push on teaching kids critical thinking. I think that is important.
That is a big push today? That does not. When I look at the educational landscape, it does not seem like that is the big push. Not in the public schools, anyway.
Yeah, well, in the public, the big push now is just these social agendas,
Right.
of course, in the public schools.
Don't think about it too much.
That's right. Because if you think about it and you say what you're thinking out loud and you don't agree with the narrative, you're in big
You're in trouble.
You're canceled. Bye-bye.
Yeah. I don't care if you're in second grade. You're canceled.
That's right. That's right. But the idea, though, that we should teach our kids to be aware and be critical of everything, like especially suspicious things like religion, that people try to shove down people's throats. Okay. But I sometimes say too that it's good to be able to think carefully through, logically, and reason and critique things, but it's also very important to know things worth thinking about. So the thing I try to talk about there is the idea of a knowledge base. That ideally, as you go through your life, the things that that are important grow and grow and grow. So when you do have time to sit back and think, you've got something worth thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll just start riffing off of that baseline.
Sweet.
Yeah, and we can do the prudence thing for sure if you want.
Okay. Welcome back to the Catholic Man Show. I'm David Niles, here with Adam Minahan, our special guest, Dr. Kevin Vost. Thanks for being here, Kevin.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So memory is, like your thing. It's your shtick. I don't know if that's. I think that's an insulting way to put it. I'm sorry I did that. But I'm glad that you're doing that because I don't hear people talking about it, and I feel like people a long time ago used to be a lot better at memory. Before you could just Google something over and over and over again. You don't have to remember it. Who cares? Just Google it again later if you need it. So it's something that I think as a race, people, we have this capacity to use, and we're just totally undeveloped. We just have not developed that side of our personhood. And so as Catholics, we want to be as full as we can be. And so I'm glad that you're out here doing this work because, I didn't even know it was a problem until I realized from people like you and some of the work that you put out that, I'm bad at this. I'm very bad, and I should be better. I think one reason that we should be better at this is for the sake of the virtue of prudence. Kind of between segments here, we were talking about how memory plays a big role in prudence. Can you talk about that?
Sure. And the special memory techniques that I specialized in my work as a psychologist, I did a master's thesis on using these special methods with children and adolescents.
Mm-hmm.
Later, I did work at an Alzheimer's center where we saw what happened to people's memories as they're losing their abilities through dementia or brain injuries of various kinds. We also looked at just normal aging, what happens to you there. So there's this definite cognitive component to memory. We need it for adequate daily living and thinking and learning. But there's also an ethical component. But these special methods that I talk about, they go back to the ancient Greeks, and they were first used by orators, public speakers, or lawyers, people who would get up there. So they had these methods. They could keep key ideas in their mind, in their exact order, and give long orations without a single note, never losing their place. Mm-hmm. They're not memorizing things word for word because you could trip up, but all the key ideas that then let them ad lib through all the crucial points. That's how these things originated from the poet Simonides in Greece in like 500 BC or so. But a big development happened in the Middle Ages with some of our Catholic church doctors. And St. Albert the Great was one of the key figures. He lived from about 1200 to 1280. He's St. Thomas Aquinas' teacher. He's a patron saint of scientists. He was called the Great while he was still alive because he had such encyclopedic knowledge, and not just theology, but literally almost everything from anatomy down to zoology. He contributed to all these different scientific fields, and one thing that caught his interest was memory. And a big thing he did here, there was a body of literature that went back to Aristotle on how does the human memory work, feeding on the information from the senses and so on. There was a separate body of knowledge that was attributed back to Cicero in the Latin writing of these special memory improvement techniques. And St. Albert integrated them both and showed how they mesh together. But he moved the memory techniques from primarily, oratory and learning to an ethical purpose. And he did that borrowing from Cicero, the ancient Roman, because they talked about different parts of virtues, like different capacities you have to fully live out a key, like a cardinal virtue, like prudence, and prudence being practical wisdom. Cicero said, and Albert agreed, that 3 fundamental parts are memory, understanding, and foresight. So memory has a past element, understanding the present situation. Foresight looks to the future. So basically, to achieve virtuous goals in the future, requiring foresight, we're going to analyze our current situation using our present understanding, but we're to make decisions guided on the lessons we learned in the past. And that depends upon memory. So Albert says, because we always move, from now into the future, we never go backwards. He said, for this reason, in a sense, memory is the most important part of prudence, because what's going to guide our moral behaviors are the ethical lessons that we learned and retained from the past. And as Catholics, it would include things like the tenets of the faith, the moral principles of our own faith. That should form the cornerstone of our ethical actions. So Albert actually, he went and commented line by line on this oldest book that we have on these memory techniques called the Ad Herennium. It just means to some guy named Herennius. We don't have the formal title. We don't even know for sure who wrote it. Though for years it was thought it was Cicero there. But Albert says he actually recommends that you train your memory as a component of prudence, enhance your ability to learn and hold on to things that are important. And then Thomas Aquinas, built upon his teacher St. Albert, and he wrote about memory as a part of prudence, like smack dab in the middle of his Summa Theologica. And I tell people, if you maybe come across this, it's like over 3,000 pages, over 1.5 million words. They sell a hardcover Latin-English edition that's over 30 pounds shipping weight for all these 8 volumes minus the supplement. But anyway, almost smack dab in the middle, second part of the second part, 49th question. First article is whether memory is a part of prudence. And then Thomas tells us, yes, it is. And here's why. Because some people thought, no, memory wouldn't be, because memory is just like a natural ability. I mean, animals have some form of memory, and prudence is a virtue that relies on our intellect. And Thomas showed how through using the art of memory, specialized techniques, we use our intellects and our reasoning abilities and other capacities to alter the way we remember things. So we can do things that no other animal can. So he said, if you really want to exercise prudence, now Thomas being Thomas, he moves from 3 parts of Cicero and Albert to a full 8 parts. So he talks about other things you have to have, like docility, the willingness to learn from others, shrewdness, the ability over time to be able to think on your feet, and all this other stuff. But he starts with memory. And Thomas says basically there's 4 things you need to do to perfect your memory. And I'll start with 3 and 4 because we know these already. He says if you want to memorize something, you have to concentrate, you have to focus. You also have to repeat it, rehearse it. There's the old saying, repetition is the mother of memory. But then these 2 elements of the artificial memory. The first, he says, we need to take some, he uses what's translated as unwanted, unwanted, or strange, or unusual, or marvelous. Make some image of whatever it is you're trying to remember, something you could picture in your mind's eye, something concrete, even if what you're trying to remember is abstract or spiritual. He says, so form a mental image. And then he says, put the images you're forming in an organized order. Put them in a series of locations, because there's another old saying, confusion is the mother of forgetfulness. so organization is the opposite, is also a component of memory. So the 4 things, he says, you need to use visual images, put them in a certain order, and concentrate while you're doing this, and repeat it until you've got it.
So I know that I've seen techniques about usually magicians who they'll give you a deck of cards and they say, shuffle and put them in any order. And then they will take it, look at it, one time, hand it back to you, and then repeat all 52 cards in the order. And basically what they do is they tell they make up a story as they're like seeing the cards, like, oh, the 5 of clubs went to and the more creative and interesting you can make that story in your mind, the better you're going to remember it. It's kind of like what you're saying, like maybe even a silly image, something that's so weird. The weirder it is, maybe the better. When you're creating this, all right, you have a concept. What is an image that's going to remind you about that concept?
Yes, exactly. And it's always recommended to make them strange and unusual because we see so much every day we forget what's mundane, but what's really strange stands out. And I'll just mention too with the card, I've seen that myself. There's a guy, Sal the Hitman Pacenti, and he helps casinos track down cheaters, and he's a thorough memory expert. And I had breakfast with him, his wife, a few years ago, and he, with my wife and kids, he demonstrated that card. He could do it, in just a minute or two with that deck. And then I discovered a little while later there was one of the great Dominican master generals, like in the 1700s, who helped revive the order, and said he could do the same thing. Just think this master general that can memorize a deck of cards in just a couple of minutes. Because there's kind of techniques out there for everything. But a key component though is making those images kind of strange and unusual. If I can give you one example. In my first memory book, Memorize the Faith, we go over memorizing all kinds of things. And one of the things we talk about is the Beatitudes. And also, making things strange and unusual is a component. Also, if you can actually see it, it's a little bit easier than even imagining it. So some of them are illustrated. So one of my favorites, the illustrator Ted Schlwender Fritz, he drew this, that's his name. I think I remember it right.
Yeah.
But he actually illustrated 3 of my memory books with different publishers, or 4 of them actually. But anyway, so he's drawing this grizzly bear holding a purse sitting on a cushion, because now we're trying to memorize bearing persecution. Okay,
Nice.
So we're doing, and another, like on the pool table there, it's the 30th location, is a big bullfrog surrounded by billiard balls, because we're remembering the books of the Old Testament as they're laid out in the Catechism, their order, and the 30th is the book of Jeremiah. And for people old enough, you're going to know that Jeremiah was a bullfrog, according to that
he was
music.
he was a friend of mine.
He was a friend.
Yeah.
You're a little bit older than I thought, if you remember that.
So I guess imagination plays a big role in memory. So as a dad, as I have young children, the importance of cultivating the imagination within my children play not only a role in their literary skills, but also in their memory skills.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up the 2 with the kids. My master's thesis that examined kids was memory, strategy, instruction, and the internalization of higher psychological processes in adolescence. But this idea of internalization,
just some light reading.
Yeah. Light reading, yeah. If you got to, go out to the beach or something,
Right, exactly.
Get your little drink there and read that. but anyway, this internalization process, because it's based on this theory of Russian psychologist Vygotsky, and he's saying that as we develop from kids to adolescents to adults, things usually come to us externally, socially, from our parents, and our teachers. And also we learn better that things are presented externally, things we can actually see. So like the younger the child, the more helpful it's going to be if they actually have pictures or illustrations, or like when I go through these location techniques, if they're actually sitting in their own house laying out these locations. So the younger the child is, the more concrete, the more external the aid is, the better. And as the kids get older, they become more and more proficient, their imagination grows, and they're able to do more and more of this on their own.
So we've talked about, we've done episodes on imagination in the past, and I do think that as adults, our imaginations should be better, not worse. Kids have a natural inclination to imagine and play, right? But as adults, we should have, imagination is not for kids. It's for adults too. Without it, this, our memory just is not the same. We'll talk more about this on the other side of the break.
We'll be right back.
Okay.
Yeah, let's keep rolling. Welcome back to the Catholic Command Show. Here today with Dr. Kevin Vost.
Vost. Gotcha.
I didn't remember it.
No. Think about, get a good image in your head.
Something abstract.
Like a ghost eating toast.
On top of a post.
Okay? Or something. I don't know.
I don't know.
You pick your own image, all right?
But we were talking about the imagination for children, imagination for adults, how that plays a role in memory. And I was curious. Last night I asked this question, but I want to ask it again for the show. Right now, one of the things that I'm doing for especially my younger kids is just having them memorize things, especially like things of the faith, like memorize the books of the Bible, memorize the cardinal virtues, memorize the theological virtues, memorize as many prayers as you can, both in English and Latin. Like, I'm just trying to almost program them, so to speak, so they can remember it. I'm not necessarily focused as much on making sure that they internalize it, make sure they understand everything, but more about just getting them to memorize it. And then as they go, as they're used to the words, the virtuous words, or the different books of the Bible, then they can start asking questions about it. Do you think that is a good idea, or do you think that I have just dropped the ball as a father?
Well, I hate to tell you this, but I think it's a very good idea. Actually, no, it is a good idea because, the kids, their cognitive skills develop gradually over time. The great people like Jean Piaget have laid out these different stages that are commonly seen, as kids develop from infants to young kids to around 7 or so, they develop these concrete reasoning abilities around the age of 11 or 12, these more abstract abilities. So it's a natural progression. So you want to kind of feed them what's suited to them at the time. So I say, if you just start with basic memorization, they know particular terms, they have some sense of what they mean, that's great. Then the older they get, the more they're going to be able to dig deeper and know it better and better as time goes on. So their knowledge base is going to become broader and broader, but also sturdier, and have more depth to it. Like with the virtues, you might start them out just knowing what the name of them are and give some general sense. Kids can probably grasp fortitude or courage, and one component is being brave, and then as they grow, you can learn there's so much more to it. Like if you read St. Thomas Aquinas, he does hundreds of pages on the cardinal virtues of courage and justice and temperance and prudence, So then he talks about all these different parts. Like we talked about 8 parts of prudence, and there's a dozen or so virtues that help justice, So as time goes on, you can dig deeper and deeper because our faith is almost of unfathomable depth. But I think, yes, with kids, I think it's good to give them that knowledge base, give them some basic facts to work with, because if they're not there, the chances are that deeper understanding is never going to happen. You're laying the seeds that I think ideally will grow and develop over the years. So I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, their ability to, depending on which kids you're talking about, but their ability to even come to an understanding is going to be so limited anyway. It would be might be a really short lesson.
Right.
Yeah. But kids that memorize things so easily. So that's a great gift, I think. I wish I had memorized the books of the Bible when I was young, because maybe I'd still know most of them. I could still memorize them, but I'm a lot busier now. When I was a kid, turns out I had nothing to do. And so anyway, I think that's a great thing that you're doing.
Okay, so another question that I have is there's different types of memory, right? So there's like retrospective memory, there's like memory for the future, like you were talking about, like foresight. There's also like comprehension memory. I don't know what you call that actually, if that's the actual term or not, but there's different types of memory. Is there ways of, does this system that St. Thomas lays out with the palace that you pick up on, does that help with all aspects of memory, or is there different ways to utilize or to grow in these memory?
Yeah,
memory?
And these particular techniques, I mean, it's one very powerful technique or class of techniques, but there's others out there. I mean, people point out they learn things through songs, through rhyme, through acronyms. Like when I grew up, we learned HOMES, HOMES, here in Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior, for the Great Lakes, or for the musical, EGBDF, Every Good Boy Does Fine, and things like that. Those can be very, very powerful and can stick with you. But I must admit, I'm tired. I'm losing my track of my thought. What was the original question?
So does this actually help with foresight, with retrospect, with
that's right,
comprehension?
Right. That's right. Yeah, it can. These techniques are most amenable to, like, you have a certain body of information that you want to. I say, I want to know this. I want to know what the 10 Commandments are, or hey, I found a half an hour open in my schedule. I want to memorize all the books of the Old Testament in order, or the new.
Yeah.
Or you're on you're on the job and you've got some new procedure that has 12 steps. Hey, I'd like to know these in my own head, backward and forward. I don't have to keep opening up the manual or clicking on the page that has them or whatever. So you can use this for anything that a particular body of information, a list, a series of steps, particular facts, vocabulary, words, English, foreign, whatever. They can apply admirably well to all that. Some of these other types of memory, like prospective memory, like, I need to remember tomorrow, I need to go to the store and do this and that. Well, if you have a grocery list, this technique can help you master that in a snap of the fingers. But will you remember certain other things that you're supposed to do the next day, that future memory? It's a little bit different. It's not going to be quite the same. You may or may not think tomorrow, I was supposed to go to the grocery store.
Right.
But there can be techniques you can do. I don't do this myself, but there are some memory techniques that involve, like there's a method you can use to say, hey, January 12th, 2014, what day of the week was that? Now, I'm not proficient. I've lost it now. I don't have it. But there are methods now where you could say it, because you just memorize like the first day of each month and what day that starts on. You can do mathematical calculations and do that. So you could form like a template in your head of a week in advance. Use these images for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then place little images on each day. Okay, I'm getting my tooth yanked out because I got to go to the dentist on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tying that in with Wednesday comes from Odin in the Norse mythology. So there's Odin. He's got his eye patch maybe, and no, he's pulling my tooth out. Okay, so on Wednesday I got to go to my.
You have an eye patch on your tooth.
Eye patch on my. You could do that too.
Yeah.
See, now that's the thing too. You pointed that out right. These are infinitely flexible. You make the image whatever the heck you want. Like I was just thinking, am I Vost or Vost? Another one, okay, because I thought of this because I was eating breakfast at the hotel this morning. I saw some bunch of Cheerios. If you think of me, it's not the most flattering thing, but imagine me with a great big Cheerio over surrounding my face. It might remind you it's a long O, because we know Cheerios, but who ever heard of Cheerios? You know,
So I like that. Yeah.
But yeah, so these are just infinitely flexible. Yeah, there's different kinds of memories too. A crucial distinction is verbal memory and visual memory. It actually ties into more to the hemispheres of our brain for almost everybody, even left-handers like me. Your left hemisphere tends to be dominant for verbal, your right for visual information. And these memory techniques like the ones Thomas talk about, they use both. They use verbal puns. They're often used for verbal information, and yet you encode them with these wacky visual images. You're kind of like firing up both sides of the brain at once and increasing your chances you're going to remember it. And another thing they do, another distinction of memory is like semantic memory or declarative memory, what they call like book learning. Here's what I've read. Here's what I studied in a class, in a textbook, versus experiential memory, what I've actually lived through. And we tend to do much better at remembering our own life experiences than something dry we read in a book. So another thing these memory methods do is, in a sense, they turn that book learning into an experience, into this imagined scenario that you've gone through.
So is that how people do photographic memory? How does that work? How does photographic memory? Because
that's more of like something you're born with, right? I mean,
the people who have unusually powerful memories, it does tend to be an inborn capacity. But I will say the researchers have done some experience where they take people with near photographic memory and pit them against true memory experts who trained in this stuff for years and years. And the trained people usually win over the people with naturally powerful. But of course, if you took a photographic memory person who's willing to learn the methods, then watch out. They'll be unlimited.
Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah. But for some of us, though, we have a hint of photographic memory in what's actually called flashbulb memories. And I'm sure you've heard examples of this. Like when I was young, it was always, where were you when John F. Kennedy was shot?
Right.
Later, when I was a young man, it was, where were you when the Challenger exploded. You know, and so we have those things that we share. Then it became 911. And I can tell, I know what I had for supper Sunday, November 15th, 1986. My wife made a homemade pizza. My brother came over and had it with us because in the middle of the night, her water broke and our son was born the next day, you know. So certain things that are traumatic, that stand out, either to all of us as a nation or personal things, it tends to be, ingrained in our memory without purposely trying to concentrate and repeat and all this. It's just, it's there. It has such a powerful emotional impact, because that's another aspect of memory. A strong emotional component to it, and the stronger the emotion, the more likely we're going to.
Yeah, the more passion there is around it. Like I think the most recent one is, where were you when you heard the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade? That'll be a brand new one. That'll be one. And in fact, when it happened, I said, I'm going to remember this moment.
And that's a good one. That's a good memory.
Right. Yeah. Like and I can remember exactly. You know, you do have more of that. I can see where I was, what happened, you know, like, whereas you ask me anything else, pick a different memory, I don't know, like.
What'd you wear yesterday?
Right, exactly.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. So, yeah, to remember things on purpose, we have to, if it's not naturally a phenomenal thing, we have to make it special. We have to use our imaginations to enhance it and make it strange, unusual, striking in some way.
And this is so important with the faith because we never know, like St. Peter, he says, you know, always be ready to give an account, okay? We should be ready because we don't know necessarily when we're going to be asked to give that account for, you know, the faith or for the hope that lies within us. So having these techniques, knowing the things that are most important to you, because I think like generally what we're saying is that if you want to memorize things with these techniques, it's not something that happens on accident. You need to choose. You need to do it intentionally, right? Unlike somebody who maybe has a photographic memory or eidetic memory who just remembers absolutely everything that happened to them just because they're special.
Yeah, it's such a rare thing, and that is true. It involves effort, because Thomas, even when he's talking about it, St. Thomas Aquinas, he says, that memory is not just in us by nature, it's perfected by art and diligence, by skill and practice. And he's borrowing from Cicero there. So yeah, for the vast majority of us, it takes work. So like these particular methods that I talk about, you got to work at them at first before they become automatic. So you kind of pay your dues, but once you've done it, they become very easy. But after that period of practice, customization.
Yeah, you put in the effort up front, it pays dividends later.
Exactly.
Okay, we'll be right back.
Last segment.
Do you want to do the demo?
We'll do it after this next
after the
segment.
Yeah.
Oh, after this one.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Pitch
Last
the-
segment means last like structured one. Then the
Oh.
last
For
one is
the
going to
radio.
be the one goes on.
Oh, okay, very nice.
So what was
Very
the
nice.
one you wanted to talk about? You said I'm going to say this so that I don't forget it at the beginning of the show. You should have been an image.
This is why I said it out loud, though.
Did
Did I say?
did Aquinas talk about like coffee and memory? Like, does that?
Stimulants.
Stimulants of memory. I know he has some nice articles on wine and how you should not be insensitive to it and hate it because it's a good thing that God gave, though some people shouldn't be drinking it. But coffee, well, now let's see. Didn't the Arabs invent it? Did Thomas know coffee?
I don't know if he would have known
don't
coffee.
know.
Oh, what a bummer! Think
think
about how
about
much.
the world.
Like, think about how much bigger the Summa could have been.
Oh
if he
my
had
God.
Hussars made their triumph yet?
No, because that was in the 1500s.
Yeah.
Thomas on coffee. What a thought! Wow.
Maybe it's a good thing.
Espresso.
Like,
Well, he's an Italian too, so
I mean,
Yeah.
it could have been too much.
it could have been. It could have been. Oh, that's wild.
Okay.
Yeah, let's keep going, Juan. Welcome back to the Catholic Man Show. I'm David Niles here with Adam Minahan. We've got Dr. Kevin Vost here in studio. We're talking about memory. I have two questions.
Start with number 2.
Okay, I will. We've been talking about how the imagination plays this really pivotal role in these particular memory techniques. So is there any research or evidence showing that adults who read fiction, more fiction novels, are better at memory? Is there any correlation there, but just between?
Now it's fascinating. I personally don't know. I've not come across that, but that I could see if I would just guess it'd be possibly yes, because that fiction, right? Yeah, you're creating the whole scenario.
You're
in your head.
exercising your imagination. As you
Oh.
read that book, you can see it happening. You know what I mean?
Oh, exactly. And how many times have you heard a person say, I read that book, then I saw the movie. Oh, well, the movie, of course, was nothing like the book,
Right.
Because you can't capture all that whole world you build in your own mind. So an interesting concept. I don't know for sure, but I could see that the value of reading that fiction. Creating those worlds within your head. You're imagining what every character looks like, what every setting looks like. Maybe even the voices of the people, the memory for sound. So
Yeah, you just
A
get
cool
providing
thought.
yourself more ammo to use for your memory.
yeah, exactly. And I just know everybody has their own tendencies. Like my own reading, I'm mostly a nonfiction reader. I'm doing spiritual, philosophical reading and stuff in the
Right.
mornings. But as the day progresses, I move towards fiction, and I love at nighttime. Reading the novels because it's more relaxing. It fires up the imagination and probably affects the dreams you have at night too. But I think there's great value in reading good fiction and strengthening the powers of the imagination.
Yeah, I just know that I've gone through in my own reading that I think when I kind of came to the faith was diving into it more deeply. I certainly had this attitude of fiction. I don't have time. I don't have time for fiction. I'm not a kid, okay? Why would I read a fairy tale? That's ridiculous. And now my opinion is totally different from that. Now I see all these value in even kids' fairy tales for me as an adult,
Oh, exactly. Adam and I were talking about that yesterday. I have a book coming out on humility with Ascension, and I include one of Aesop's fables because we talked about the value of those fables there. Yeah, and fiction. I'll tell you, one of the most powerful experiences I had, kind of a multi-sensory experience years ago, was reading Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov for the first time. But the whole time I read it, I had Rachmaninoff symphonies going in the background quietly. So
really,
that whole Russian feel to it. But yeah, we can
Why sipping vodka?
Yeah.
I should have. I'm going to have to reread it. Go get some good vodka.
Yeah, the passion.
Good idea.
Next
good
level.
idea. Then I'll read some good German literature, and I'll have to get the right stuff for that. Some schnapps or something.
Yeah.
Some good lager.
Schnapps and lager.
Both.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the other thing, my other one I was going to mention, it's not actually a question. I just wanted to give a shout out because I mentioned this before we recorded that, I don't know, years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, I picked up your book, Memorize the Reasons, which is about St. Peter, about like the papacy. At least I told you I haven't actually finished the book. I think I only read the first 2 chapters, and maybe it's just an introduction and the first chapter on this airplane. It was a short airplane ride. And after reading just the intro and the first chapter, years and years and years ago, I can still picture in my mind walking through the castle in those memory locations and seeing what happens. And I still remember oh yeah, that reminds me that, in the Gospel of Luke, for instance, one of them, you see a sailor coming out of a door riding on an ox, and the sailor is the captain of the boat, and the ox is from the symbol of St. Luke. And so you remember that in the Gospel of Luke, it talks about Jesus preaching from the bark of Peter, right? And,
exactly. Exactly.
I mean, I read this 6 years ago, and I can still, that's how powerful this technique is. So when we're done, after the segment, you're going to walk us through, one of these memory exercises.
Oh, I'd love to do a simple, because yours, I've done 5 memory books, and Memorize the Reason is the most advanced, because I give both reasons for, it's an apologetics book, reasons for what we believe, what we do, about the Pope and the Peter, Bible and tradition, Marian dogmas and things. But we give both the reasons themselves and where they come from, like what book of the Bible or what church father or source. So that's a tough one. But yeah, I'd be happy to do a very simple demo in a little while. Yeah.
Okay, very good. I just want to make sure people know. Stick around.
Stick around for the podcast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm also curious. Okay, so we have. You talked about being able to visualize things, and then you also talked to me last night about how a guy was visualizing the mass and remember because he was captured.
Oh yeah.
In war. Will you remind me about that?
Oh yeah, thanks. Most of my books, I come up with the ideas. Sometimes a publisher contacts me. Sometimes readers contact me. And I got contacted by this guy, and he later, I don't know if you can see it, he sent me. This is the 416 Flight Squadron, Edwards Air Force Base in California. He's an experimental F-16 fighter pilot. And he asked me for tips on memorizing.
Experimental?
Sounds like
a brave man.
His life insurance premiums are probably higher than average. But
That's right. So he was very, very interested in power of prayer and the Mass. But he asked me for tips on memorizing the Mass. And I had actually done a brief article years ago on how to memorize the rites, the order of the Mass, the different parts and things. But I found that I couldn't find that online anymore, and I didn't have my own records. So I thought, this could be the basis of a whole book. But the reason that he asked me about it was, there's a man named Jeremiah Denton. He was a POW during the Vietnam War, the 1960s. He was a fighter pilot who was shot down, and he was held prisoner for over 5 years. Very prominent man. He later became an admiral, and then he became a senator from Alabama. This man, Jeremiah Denton. He wrote about his experience in a powerful book called When Hell Was in Session, his experience as a POW. And a cool thing about it, at this time, they really treated the prisoners inhumanely, and they would try to get them to do propaganda films, the captors there in North Vietnam. And famously, one thing Denton did, when he was brought on for one of these films, he blinked his eyes in Morse code to spell out the word torture. So through doing that, he got the word out that they were being tortured. I thought that's just ingenious, And he even wrote, too, how they would sometimes transport the prisoners and would not let them talk. But the men who were sitting next to each other would push on each other's knees in the Morse code so they could communicate that way. But anyway, here's the crux of the matter. Denton wrote that what preserved his sanity during these years of captivity and torture were that every day he would mentally rehearse the Mass in his mind. He said both in Latin and in English. I'm supposing he was either a daily Mass goer or probably a server.
Mm-hmm.
He said, but that's one of the things that preserved his sanity, was knowing that Mass. I don't know if my experimental fighter pilot thought if I'm ever shot down somewhere, that might be a good thing. And then coincidentally, a few weeks later, a priest comes to our parish. I think it was a Mary Knoll missionary. And he told the story of a bishop, I believe his name was James Walsh, who the Chinese had captive for, I think it was maybe 10 years in the 50s and 60s. And he also wrote that what kept his sanity was he would mentally go through the Mass every day.
Mm-hmm.
He said the Rosary too. So I did this book, Memorize the Mass, and I call it, I think I subtitled As If Your Life Depended on It. Now, for Walsh and Denton, in a way, it literally did.
Right.
And in a more literal way, for all of us, it does. Our eternal life, in a certain sense, depends upon the Mass. So anyway, that was my motive for writing the book, Memorize the Mass, because this fighter pilot asked me, and it had the new Mass parts and also the Latin Mass. But then later I got a request from not a fighter pilot, from a grandma. Said, hey, my kids are growing up in the Latin Mass. Would it be possible to do a book just on the Latin so they wouldn't be distracted by, so they could focus more just on that? So later I did that,
sure.
that book too.
One of the things I love about this is that it makes you be intentional about things, which I think is one of the big burdens of modernity, is that you just kind of like don't even pay attention to things. Like, we haven't even thought, oh, maybe I should choose something. So if you're going to start memorizing things, all of a sudden you now have to choose, what is important to me? What is the most important thing for me to learn? Like, where am I going to start? And I think just that's a good mental exercise in and of itself, for you to kind of analyze your own life. Where are you as a person? What should you learn first?
That's a great take on it. There's an old quote from Aristotle I love. He said, it's better to know a little bit about sublime things than a lot about trivial things. And we're kind of living in a culture where the trivial is constantly pouring out at us, so, and two, it's not a rejection of everything, like a rejection of all the distraction technology, but how am I going to rein them in and focus most of my attention on what is most important? And even Thomas writes about the vice of curiositas, where we're distracted and everything's drawing us away, and the virtue of studiositas, when we find things worth knowing, that can we channel ourselves and focus ourselves to really dig in deep.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great idea that, if we are going to use these techniques, then each of us has to decide what's important for me to remember, what's worth knowing inside my own head.
Yeah, hundreds of years ago, before information was just so prevalent, if there was a book, it was going to be on important things, right? If you only have a few books, you're going to get books on the things that are most important. Now that information is so readily available, which is in and of itself a very good thing, but it obscures the important from the unimportant in the mass of availability.
No, exactly. That's a good point too. Like, I think back to like St. Albert and Thomas, the memory masters. They're living before the printing press,
right?
So the manuscripts are very, very rare. So when they would like visit a different monastery or something, they're in that library, and they said Thomas is actually memorizing much of this. Like for the Catena Aurea, the Golden Chain. Some people even think that a big part of the Summa Theologica may have been dictated from Thomas's memory, because he got a hold of a text, he's going to need to internalize it because they're so hard to come by. But so today we're just swarming, in books and reading materials. So we do have, it's much harder to make a choice because there's so many things, so much more to choose from. But on the other hand, all the great treasures throughout the ages, like in the Catholic history, they're there for us. So if we want to seek them out, the great spiritual classics, the stuff from St. Francis de Sales, the Imitation of Christ, Thomas's writings, Augustine's, the great mystics and Teresa of Avila, all those folks, they're there for us. If we decide to take the time to choose them to focus on and read them, and then maybe try to memorize a few key ideas that we get from them.
One thing I heard, I read somewhere that someone asked Thomas what was one of the greatest gifts that he ever had, and that he received, and he said one of the things is that I understood everything I've ever read, which is just like mind blowing.
That's right.
I'll have to pray for that.
So we're out of time on the radio. If you would go to thecatholicmanshow.com, you can check out this full podcast, because we're going to do a demonstration on the podcast on memory. We're on the Lord's team,
the winning side.
So raise your glass
and cheers to Jesus.
Very good. Okay, let's do it.
So you're gonna do.
Let me concentrate. I gotta get. Let me get concentration going. Maybe do some push-ups, some feats of strength. Get the blood flowing.
That is good. Yeah. There's a definite component there. Thomas says, that the virtues are to the soul as health and fitness and beauty are to the body. And they're all tied in, of course. We're in soul bodies, so they work together.
So what are you going to do? What would you like to do the exercise on?
Okay. Here's how we can do it, too. I can either reveal up front what we're doing, or we can do it and then reveal what we've done.
Let's do the reveal at the end.
I like the second
See,
one.
I kind of like the suspenseful version.
I do too.
I do too.
Though some people might catch on early on, but we'll see.
That's okay.
All right, here's our exercise.
All right.
Now, I ask you to turn your powers of concentration and imagination on high.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to journey with me to my home in central Illinois. It is a sprawling ranch house surrounded by mature maples and oaks. You walk up to my front door, you ring the doorbell, and who should open the front door? Not me or my wife, but Wonder Woman herself. The red, white, and blue outfit, the golden power bracelets, and the lasso and all that. And she's also holding a puppy in her arms, and it is so cute you cannot help yourself. You go, "Aw."
Oh.
Okay.
Well, that's our first image, okay? Wonder Woman, the puppy, you go, "Ah." That's the front door. That's number one. Number two, now you're going to step inside, and I have a doormat there. And who do you see on that doormat but your own priest? But you're going to think of him now not as Father so-and-so, but as Reverend, another title, right?
Okay.
Reverend's there. And he's also sitting on his motorcycle, revving it up, revving the engine. Right? I don't know if he has one or not. But
Father Brooks had a motorcycle. I can see
Reverend
Reverend Brooks.
I could see him actually riding a motorcycle.
Or it could be a sports car, a muscle car.
He'd look good on a chopper.
Yeah,
A chopper.
I think so.
Yeah, but in the Reverend, Okay, so that's number two, the Reverend revving at the doormat. Number three, there's this little glass panel next to the front door. We're still in my entranceway. And you look outside there, and you thought, boy, how come I didn't notice this when I came through? There's actually a cliff out in his front yard, and there's a little man sliding down it, trying to hang on by his fingertips, and he's going, "There's no ledge," and he's sliding down the cliff. There's no ledge. Can we picture that? Sad sight. That's number three. Number four, now you're back in my foyer, and against this back wall, there is a picture there. And what the picture shows is a huge fort. A fort is in this portrait. And you can make it whatever kind of fort you want. A medieval castle. It could be one of the Western, the Western military forts from the U.S. So you could have boulders bouncing off it if you want, or arrows or bullets, whatever. But there's a fort there at number four. And then number five, on the side of my foyer wall there's this huge, there's this gun rack there at the side wall there. And what you see there are two judges. And they're judges because they're wearing their black robes. And there's a left judge and a right judge. And the left judge says something to you, you're like, "Oh, yeah." And the right judge says something, and it doesn't make any sense. You go, "Gosh, I don't know what the right judge meant." So you can picture that. I don't know what the right judge meant. All right. And then number six, there's just two more. We're in the center of our foyer there. And you kind of sense there's this something overshadowing you. You have this kind of sense of doom. There's something over your head there. So you say to yourself, "What am I standing under?" Everyone heard the story, the sword of Damocles, that this prince there is hanging under the sword dangling by a thread. He says, "This is what it's like to be a leader." Everyone's trying to get you. But anyway, something threatening overhead, and you're saying, "What am I standing under?" And here's the last one. 7. There's a chandelier overhead. And what's odd about this chandelier is sitting on top of it is a gigantic wisdom tooth. This great big wisdom tooth there for some reason. Now, when I do these demos, I point out that repetition's the mother of memory, and that these methods are designed so you'll know things backwards and forwards in their exact order. So I'll do quickly, if we can just review. Number 7, we had that wisdom tooth up in the chandelier. Number 6, the center of the foyer, what am I standing under? Number 5, there by the gun rack, the two judges, you don't know what the right judge meant. Number 4, we had the fort up on the back wall. Number 3, we had the guy sliding down saying, "There's no ledge." Number 2 was the doormat there with your Reverend his hot rod or his Harley or whatever it is. And then at the front door, Wonder Woman herself and holding that cute puppy. And we go, "Ah, okay." So So it's like I said last night, a true story. Central Illinois, my mom was a farmer's daughter. And if I said something unusual, didn't seem to make sense, she'd say, what does that have to do with the price of beans? Meaning soybeans. What's that have to do with anything? Well, what have we done? This is a demo I did a few times live a few weeks ago for the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
So here's how it works. And there's been different terminology throughout time with this. So I'm giving the ones that they're using now in the United States. But the first, at the front door, wonder and awe. Wonder and awe. And the older term was a fear of the Lord, another how that's also known. The second one, the doormat, with the reverend for reverence, and that was also known as piety is another one for that. Number 3, the knowledge is fairly straightforward for knowledge. Number 4, our fort stands for fortitude or courage is sometimes. Number 5, for the right judgment. It's often called now right judgment. It used to be called counsel. Sometimes they call it good judgment, but just right judgment, just a little play on words there. And number 6, standing flip the words around, understanding. And 7 with the wisdom tooth.
Wisdom.
Yeah, So I do like this with the kids. In Springfield now they're doing the confirmation like 3rd and 4th graders, and the vast majority of them got this. I did the little demo one time, and I got them down now. And the reason I actually give them in this order, because if you go to Isaiah 11 verses 1-3, you're going to hear the Spirit of the Lord, came upon him, and you're going to go wisdom and understanding. You're going to work your way from wisdom down to fear of the Lord, or what we call wonder and awe. Now, and some of the great, church theologians like St. Gregory the Great did this, St. Robert Bellarmine, they say the way they're listed in Isaiah is like they're coming down from above, the highest gift to the least, wisdom at the height to the fear of the Lord at the beginning, because we know in the Bible says fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So they arrange them as a hierarchy. So they say if you arrange them in the other order, it's like we're climbing a spiritual ladder. We're starting with fear of the Lord, which is the beginning of wisdom. Then each of these gifts takes us a rung higher, takes us deeper into communion with God until we reach wisdom at the end. But anyway, that's just there's one example of the way you can use a location system and images to remember whatever you want. Like for one example, when I first laid out this little foyer that actually has 10 locations, we didn't need them all. I did it for the 10 Commandments. And the reason that gun rack was there over on the right, it had a big padlock on it because the 5th commandment is thou shalt not kill. So there was some meaning for that. And I will say, when I used to do radio programs on this, and I would say, well, this foyer is actually patterned after my own foyer. At the time, as my wife had it decorated at the time I wrote the book, it's very different now, of course. But I would say, but I do not have a gun rack in my foyer. But one time I told
it's in the closet.
It's in the closet. And I said that on Louisiana Catholic radio, and the guy said, "Oh no, there's nothing unusual about having a gun rack in your foyer." And then I told that story to
Billy's got 4.
Billy got that's right. And then I tell the story to your friends down in Texas, and the guy said, "What was unusual was the padlock."
Right, yeah.
And then I go do a talk up in Michigan, and it's at like this lodge, and the people start kind of laughing because I didn't realize that up above me is a fireplace that actually has crossed rifles right over my head. I didn't know it, So just fun little stuff. But anyway, once you form a location system like this, it becomes like a mental notepad. And in my first book, Memorize the Faith, you go through 6 rooms, you get 60 locations. So then you can reuse those same locations. Like we do the 10 Commandments there. We go through all the books of the Old Testament, all the books of the New Testament. We go through the mysteries of the rosaries, the virtues, the gifts of the Holy Spirit, this, that, and the other thing. So when you learn a location system, it's like a mental notepad. And my main use for it is when I do talks. I may lay out 35, 40 points I want to make. And I go through my own house. This one's here, boom, 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 boom. So I can give that talk, in that exact order.
And do you always go from one location to the next, like in the same order?
That's right. So the order is locked in, so you know exactly where you are. And there's some other systems, like in Memorize the Reasons, I did one based on a church. Now, the oldest memory book we have from 1st century BC talks about using a house, which I did, and we're all familiar with houses. But St. Albert said in his time, some people will place a church. They'll use churches as their memory systems. So I did that in Memorize the Reasons. I did a recent book on Stoic philosophy, how to memorize some of their ethical principles. And there's this famous stoa, this porch that they taught from, that their founder Zeno. So one of the memory location systems there is an actual representation of the porch. So you go through different parts of that.
Nice.
So they can be very flexible, what you use as your location system. And I tell some people, probably the best location system you can make is one that like your own house.
Well, you have a lot of books coming out. You have 3 more books coming out this year. At least one next year. You just have one coming out by Ascension Press. Our friends at Ascension Press. What's the book on from Ascension Press?
Yeah, now this is one. It was kind of a thrill to be asked to write about this topic, though my wife kind of laughed and cracked up when she found this out. This one is about humility. It's called Humble Strength, the Eye-Opening Benefits of Humility. I told her, they must have figured I needed to do my research and learn a little bit about this topic, which I realized I did need to do that. I did need to do that. But yeah, that's on humility. So, being me, I often follow Thomas's guide, but he also comments on the 12 steps of humility from St. Benedict, this 7-story mountain of humility that St. Anselm wrote about. So I go through things like that, in a variety of chapters. Oh, and they also had me look at the modern psychological literature on humility and how that relates to just emotional adjustment, even performance in the work world. What are the benefits of being humble? Realizing, hey, there's things I need to learn. I need to be open to learn. So that's the one with Ascension coming out, at this point in July of 2022, real soon.
That's awesome. And where can they find some of your other books? Your website?
Yeah, my website's drvost.com, just drvost.com. And I don't sell them from that site, and they're not all on there, but that would be a starting point. And I have a comment box if people want to contact me.
You can probably Google.
Oh, yeah, if you Googled
Kevin Vost book.
If you do that, you'll get them. And I think now there's 20 some. And there's one coming out with Catholic Answers. It's going to be called What is God? It's based on Thomas's first 26 questions in the Summa. And then one for Sophia in the fall I'm excited about called You Are That Temple, a Catholic Guide to Health and Holiness that will look at faith and fitness issues.
Oh, cool.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on to the Catholic Command Show. It's been a lot of fun, and it's given us a lot to think about for sure.
Well, thanks. Hey, thanks for having me. This is fun. I enjoy your manly den here.
All right, we're on the Lord's team.
The winning side.
So raise your glass.